Hello. All right, awesome. I just want to say thank you for coming to my talk. Right now it's generally like nap time from when I used to go to CUSEC, so I'm like really impressed like this many people showed up. It means a lot. All right, so I'm going to be talking about the soft skills in software and how to brand yourself as a technical person. A bit of background on me. I have a degree in software engineering from the University of New Brunswick. I just graduated in May, so I'm fresh out of uni. Like most of you are going to be going into the field soon or thinking about that, so hopefully I'm relatable. And I'm currently a technical account manager at Microsoft, focused on the education sector and helping our clients within Central Ontario. A couple of years ago, I'm going to be honest, I was a barista. I was a barista at Starbucks for a long time. And I took this job because I think like many students were pretty broke, right? But when it came to what got me to Microsoft now and the amazing position I have, I honestly think about the skills that I used most being a barista. And I think it's interesting and important that we challenge ourselves on the concept of why soft skills are becoming so important in the IT industry now. I'm sure if you're going through co-op or maybe your mom's helping with your resume and put the fluffy soft skills down, like you're good at communication, which is definitely a soft skill. And I used to think of soft skills as something that make eye contact with your interviewer, be super friendly, but it's a lot more than that. And when I do think about when soft skills came into play for me, it really was when I was working in customer service. And that's based on working with the diverse teams of people, working in a fast-paced environment, as well as having to de-escalate certain situations and having to communicate with internal and external customers. When I was looking at my job assignments after a shift at work, I wasn't exactly thinking about how great my communication with my code was. And for me, it was really hard to take where my soft skills would take me from being a barista to how they would help me as a software developer. And I'll be honest, I don't really develop code now, but in the IT industry, when you do have soft skills, you're seen as being an asset and having a competitive edge. When you think about it, what do we do as software individuals? We serve people. And there's people behind who are using our code and people who are creating it. And by having soft skills and using that capabilities, you're adding to your toolbox. I think it's interesting that we look at some stats right now in our current IT ecosystem. So in an industry that apparently cannot hire technical resources fast enough, we have a more pronounced gap in the soft skills than we do have in hard skills. And 59% of employers recognize a lack of soft digital skills among their employees. And when it comes to the 6 most sought after soft skills, when it comes to hiring incoming talent, there's communication, critical thinking, adaptability, collaboration, creativity, and productivity and accountability. These are some skills that I never would have traditionally thought of as being soft skills. And I think it's important we ask, how do we hit that sweet spot? Where do I find myself being, the social person at work, which I think is how we perceive people with soft skills to be, and being that technical asset. And for me, soft skills are a transferable and transitional skill that we as technical people can leverage to have more of an impactful relationship with software. Unlike sitting down to learn a new framework, you can't sit down in a class and practice adaptability. You cannot practice soft skills the same way you would own a coding language. You have to be out in the wild, practicing with real people, with real teams in order to, begin that uncomfortable journey of becoming more comfortable with your soft skills. When you do take the two, you generally have a more fulfilling and meaningful career. I know for me, as someone who, with a technical background, gets to work in a technical setting, but has more of a relationship management career, I find that, for me, much more fulfilling than sitting behind a computer as a developer all day. And soft skills are hard to quantify, like technical skills. When you think about going in for an interview, it's kind of hard to quantify adaptability versus how good of a Python programmer you are. But when you do merge the two together, you become someone who's very adaptable to your employer. And they see you as someone who can take on more roles and responsibilities, and you're more likely to actually get certain promotions and to be led into a career path that's much more geared towards you. When I think of when I used my soft skills and technical skills the most starting off, I think of when I was a robotics teacher. I taught kids ages 7 to 17 robotics. If I didn't understand hardware, I mean basic level hardware, let's be honest, and I didn't understand how to program or write algorithms, I wouldn't have been a very effective robotics teacher. But if I also didn't understand how to communicate with different crowds of people and how to problem solve at different levels, I wouldn't have been very good at actually problem solving and letting this crowd of people explore their journey through tech. And I think that's one of the amazing things that leveraging soft skills and technical skills can do, is that you actually empower others to be better. Now, when it comes to soft skills and being in the tech field, I think it's important to realize that you're not just a piece of code, it's a person. When you're going through university, I think a lot of the time we feel like we have to be developers, we have to be these very technical people, but you're allowed to bring your whole self to work. And I encourage you that when you begin to brand yourself, you become more of a multifaceted person in the eyes of your employer and your team. And it really communicates how awesome of an individual you are. And I just want to go through what it's like what it was like for me. So I have an amazing job at Microsoft now, but I'm going to be honest, it didn't start out too hot for me. And it didn't really hit my career, I guess, escalation path until about third year. So I started off university in 2014, and by 2015, so let's say second year, I was basically a full-time barista at Starbucks. I had a 2.6 GPA. They would not let me into co-op, and I had failed Java 2 twice. This is what happens when you're working full-time. And I was told that it's probably going to be really difficult for me to have a career in IT. And I was, pouring coffee for people. I was like, I'm never going to be a developer. Now, the next year, I started taking on very small roles, and I was offered a job as what I would call a fancy XML editor. I began working as a library clerk and then a kids robotic teacher for 2 hours a week. And through branding myself and being very open with my employers about what I wanted out of my future, I ended up snowballing each of these small opportunities into larger careers. But when you use your soft skills to communicate and work efficiently within a team, what happens is you end up building trust, because you're working with humans, and that's the main thing. Like, you might be working on code, maybe you're working with a set of customers, but you have to realize at the end of the day, you're still people. And as you work with others, leveraging soft skills and branding yourself is going to lead to a path that's much more in tune to who you are as a person. And by branding myself, I led to the exposure that I needed to ultimately be headhunted by Microsoft. So I originally started off just developing courses as a kids robotics teacher and teaching, to taking over the startup, to then being offered a job at one of the Fortune 500 tech companies. Now, when it comes to branding yourself, this is really where soft skills do play a big role. You need to create intentionality within your network. I know it's amazing being at such a large conference and you want to get the most out of it. You don't necessarily need to network with everyone. If you're an introvert like myself, networking with everyone is going to be very exhausting and taxing on you. And I think when we think of people who are really good at branding themselves, like marketing, or people who have really strong soft skills, we often think of extroverts, and that's not always the case. So if you're intentional about your network, you're going to lead to people believing more in who you are as a person. And remember that depth is sometimes a lot more useful than breadth. And that is true when it does come to connecting with certain people that are going to allow you, that are really going to believe in you and leverage your skills further. You end up becoming a really good communicator when you start to brand yourself, because you have to think a lot more about how you want to be perceived, as well as, how are you going to talk to people? Are you going to talk about your passions? How are you going to put it up on, I suggest LinkedIn? And when you do start practicing these skills of communication, it allows you to be a better communicator. It also gives you permission to be you in the workplace. It's important to it's important to bring all of you to work. I was always scared moving from managing a startup where I was me every day. I think we think of the startup community as being like very fun and fast, to when I went to a large tech company that I'd kind of be another office worker, and that's absolutely not the case. But when you do brand yourself and you're intentional about what you want and what you're passionate about, it allows you to be a lot more free in the workplace to communicate with others. And when you end up branding yourself, you distinguish yourself from other people. Having a unique resume is fantastic. So for me, I never really took specific developer co-ops. I was kicked out of co-op at one point because my GPA dropped. And when that happens, you're kind of stuck wondering, what kind of jobs am I going to be able to get that's going to allow me to be a little bit different? And when we're looking at, let's say like co-op applications, you might get 100 developers, but you might have someone who says, I really like developing, but I also really like photography. And that actually gives a point of interest for your interviewer or your employer to talk to you, connect with you on another level. So for me, I paint competitively, and I put that on my resume, and it ended up turning into a conversation about how you can read a crowd and read a room in order to communicate a lot more effectively. When you build yourself, it builds trust. If you're like really interested in AI, you're like AI expert, but you're like maybe like just reading about it, that's not branding yourself, that's lying. I see a lot of resumes and it's like, amazing front-end developer, and like, I love front-end. I would never put that for myself because I'm not amazing expert, but if I did have that and someone was like, can you build a React website right now? I'd be like, no, sorry, wrong person. But when you brand yourself with things that you're passionate about, so for me, I love education, working in the education space, that's really where I did find my passion. I do love UI, UX. I don't do anything with that right now. But I'm also very people-oriented and I love problem solving. It led me to my position I work in Microsoft right now, managing universities' infrastructure teams and helping them solve complex problems. It made me much more happier as a person than saying, I can code in 5 languages and someone pegging me to be a developer, right? And I think, in university it's really hard because they tell you like, focus on your technical skills, have 1,000 side projects. You don't need to do that to have a unique resume. Build yourself and brand yourself with what you're passionate about, and it'll lead you a lot farther. So I think it's important, who you are as a person and what you want out of your career, you need to communicate it. If you want to be like a star developer, fantastic, communicate it. If you want to be someone who works more in like a business role, communicate it. If you want to be in management, communicate it. And a lot of the times, what I've realized working, at a large tech company, people want to take you to where you want to go. And just a bit of a, example, like story time. So you can take your passions and interests and through communicating it properly, get direct outcomes. So for me, there's a couple of examples, but my favorite one is I was offered a small opportunity for designing education platform, like a little demo for Brown's University. So through my love of education and UI UX design, I had a boss I had previously left approach me and say, I have a postdoctorate who's looking for someone just like you, even though I did not do education or UI UX at all for that particular boss. And I ended up developing a small little application that would auditorily let students, press on a button and it would tell them how the day was said in their native language in Guatemala, called Quiche. And it made me very happy to have a passion side project that you also get paid for, that was more intentional than being like, I'm gonna develop a side project or hope someone reaches out to me with something they like. Now my technicals, I think it's important to know that your technical skills will really get your foot in the door. Tech companies love, whether you want like a business management role or you're looking for a developer role, your technical skills, focus on them for sure, but they're not everything. And when you do have soft skills to leverage aside, you become much more an expendable asset to the company, because it does show that you're also a human. You're not a robot, and you're able to build well within other teams and talk to other people. Now I have some hot tips to end. Your soft skills really enhance your hard-earned technical skills. I think as students, we put a lot of emphasis on being really great at the classes we have to take. And in software and computer science and any engineering, like, it's a hard degree, right? Like, you're working a lot of hours. But don't be afraid to leverage your soft skills. Go out and talk to people, network. It's painful. As an introvert, I can tell you it's absolutely painful, but it's worth it. And it's much easier when you're intentional and saying, hey, I'm really passionate about this. I would love to talk to you about it. That's a really great way to start a conversation if you've been working on your communication tactics. Be intentional with your network. My favorite is being people first and result driven, because when you care about the teams you're working on and the customers you're potentially serving or the people at the end of your product, they're going to drive a lot better results in the long run. LinkedIn can be your best friend. This is how I got hired at Microsoft, so that's, my piece of advice. I had a LinkedIn profile I kept updating, said I'm passionate in education. I love working in relationship management when I was managing my startup, and I have a technical background, and I got reached out to, which was crazy. So when you brand yourself intentionally, LinkedIn's fantastic. You're most likely to get offers that reflect what you would like as well. And brand yourself for who you want to be. Like I said, don't call yourself an AI expert like your LinkedIn headline if you're just like a junior or a novice, because you'll start getting career paths that are like, would you like to be a senior level AI software engineer? I'm not qualified. But when you are branding yourself for who you want your future self to be, it's going to lead you to a more fulfilling, maybe a slower, but more fulfilling career path. And the biggest asset you have in creating the career you want is you. I have a couple careers on the side that are very technical, but don't actually require you to be a hardcore developer, and it allows you to have a little bit more of that relationship management and business management aspect. Just some references, but I actually want to leave the room with just something to think about. If you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I think a lot of us have heard this. And for me, I remember sitting at CUSEC. I never thought I was the smartest person in the room, but I was hearing all of these really smart people talk, and I got really overwhelmed thinking, maybe I'm never going to be up to their caliber. And I went to CUSEC a couple of years ago. And then I realized maybe that's why I'm here, and it's better to learn from others, because you're going to push yourself to be a lot further, allow me to care more about what you're doing. So keep a growth mindset. As well, I had a couple of friends who went and rated the HoloLens marketing swag. So I have a couple HoloLens t-shirts to give out, as well as like these giant pouches. So if you do have a question about soft skills, the first 4 get a prize. Thanks to my friends. I was like, I'm gonna go talk at a conference, and they're like, let us go read marketing. I was like, okay. So yeah, thank you all for listening to me.